Hello and welcome to Swaay.Health, where we love exploring interesting stories from the brightest minds in healthcare marketing. Today I am joined by my colleagues, John Lynn and Brittany Quemby. We're going to recap the recent HIMSS 24 conference that we were at in Orlando, Florida. John, Brittany, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks. Excited to talk about it. A little burnt out after the HIMSS Vive back-to-back, though.
Seriously. Conference burnout is real when you have them back to back, right?
It is. It is. This is the first time we're doing it this way, like the first time where Brittany and I are together, and John, you're virtual on our screens here. So this is kind of fun, actually.
Very fun.
It would have been better if you were all in person up here in Toronto, but you know, we'll leave that for another time.
I might argue that it's better in person in Vegas.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
Vegas would be more fun, actually. That's the honest truth. Well, so let me start by asking both of you this question. What was your overall opinion of HIMSS 24, especially compared to prior years? John, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway started at the kickoff, the opening reception, which just felt way more lively than some of the past years. You know, it's ironic, as in Orlando, they always do it in that same room that's up the escalators. And I remember some pretty slow opening receptions there, you know, post-COVID for sure. But even, you know, some of the other years, a lot slower, but there was like a really good energy this year, and definitely felt like a lot more people, a lot more crowded. Now, HIMSS did make a mistake and play the music too loud. I think they were trying to compete with the energy of Vive and the party atmosphere of Vive. But, you know, I think they shouldn't replicate the bad things, which is we want to connect with people. And if the music's too loud, you can't do that, especially at an opening reception. At least save that for the closing reception where you're all tired and you don't want to talk anymore. But the good news is that the vibe was really great and there was a lot of great people. And I just stepped into the lobby, which it was so full, it was spilling out into the lobby, and you know there were drinks in the lobby anyways. So that would be my first takeaway, is that it felt like, you know, I heard a couple of people say it's back, right? And you know, certainly it's never going to be back to the 50K that we had during Meaningful Use. I think those days are gone, but it's definitely, you know, had that fuller energy. And that's true in the exhibit hall as well, that there was a lot more foot traffic in the exhibit hall than some of the past couple of years. So I'd say that's my big takeaway.
And Brittany, what about you? What's your overall opinion of HIMSS?
Yeah, and I agree with John. You know, I think coming off of Vive and going straight to HIMSS, HIMSS seems a little bit more corporate than Vive does, and I was hearing that a lot from folks. But I will agree that I think with the opening reception, they did kind of take it to the next level to have a good vibe. They had they looked like robots light up on stilts. They had some dancers. They had some really good food. There was a lot of people there, so really good chance to kind of connect with people. So that was really nice. And I do agree that I think there was a lot more foot traffic than I anticipated there, although I thought there weren't as many big booths in the exhibit hall, but there was a lot of people milling around and walking around, which was nice to see. And even just people stopping by our booth to say hi or, you know, do a video. So that was great.
Yeah, I know. For me, like walking around the exhibit hall floor, you could definitely, it was more crowded. I actually had to dodge around a lot of people a lot of times, which I didn't have to do in prior years as much. This one was definitely, there were some times where it's like, oh my gosh, I got to like, you know, weave in and out of people. So it definitely felt more full, which I really enjoyed as part of this year's HIMSS. Now, speaking of the exhibit hall floor, was there anything that stood out to you, either in terms of a booth, a trend, just an overall feeling?
So there was a lot of interesting giveaways. I tried to kind of make my way through a few of the booths, or even just interactive ways to get people to your booth. So there was one that was very interesting where they had oxygen tanks or oxygen, I guess, like stations that you could go and try out. So basically you had to go and sit and, you know, get a dose of oxygen. But while you were there, just conveniently, someone would chat with you. So it was a very interesting way to, you know, get people to stay at your booth. But there was a lot of people who were wanting to try it, myself included. I didn't get to, but I did want to get over there. So it was certainly a way to entice people to go to your booth.
That's interesting. John, what about you? Is there a booth or something that stood out to you from the exhibit hall floor?
Well, I'm feeling bad that Brittany didn't get to come up for oxygen and get a little oxygen, but that was, I guess, probably a feature of us doing so many videos. But no, I thought the biggest change that I saw was moving the Interoperability Expo to the middle of the show floor. Usually it's on the end to kind of drive people to those ends, and the fact that they moved it to the middle really created a different traffic flow, especially for them, the Interop Showcase, which I think often did get kind of left to the wayside, but I think it generated a lot more traffic for them. And it was actually kind of fun to have that area in the middle, I think, and provided some interesting traffic flow, to those organizations, but also from those organizations to the other vendors. So I think that was probably the biggest change I saw, was that change of patterns. Yeah, the other thing is probably I think there's smaller booths generally. I mean, Epic still has their own Antarctica or whatever, right? Like they have their own village. I mean, it was still massive, right? And there were a few others that were pretty massive. InterSystems had a big one, but I'd say overall there weren't as many massive booths that you normally have to like walk around, or like figure out how am I going to get there, or and so that was interesting, that change, which actually made the flow a little bit better. It made it easier to kind of go around and see different booths, and I think maybe the other thing I saw is if they did have a massive booth, it was more sitting areas and meeting areas and things like that. I think the ECW, the eClinical Works booth, had a lot of that, which made it for a nice flow as well. So I'd say maybe those were a couple of things that were interesting this year.
Yeah, and I agree. I think I like that aspect of the booths rather than, I think I mentioned on another video where a lot of booths sometimes have those like closed in meeting space, which they like to do for themselves or clients, which is great. But I like the openness or the seating area that they have. Our friends at Dell had a really cool booth where they were doing some presentations in their booth, but there was some nice open seating for people to sit at. Or even Epic, it was a large booth, but it was kind of more open and inviting where people could kind of mingle through those booths. So I always think that that's always more inviting as an attendee to stop by and engage with those folks.
They had their really amazing carpet in Epic as well. I walked through all the time, and I was like, maybe I'll walk a little slower, help my feet.
Yeah. It's like, I'll just stand right here for a second.
They do have really good underpad of whatever they put under their booth is definitely high quality there.
Kudos to all of the workers and the behind scenes folks at HIMSS, because right up until the end, there was no carpet there. And I was thinking to myself, are they even going to be able to have time to carpet all this whole space? And they did it, and it looked great. So kudos to those workers who are working behind the scenes to get all of that done.
Doesn't it seem like the booths are more polished though? Like, I don't know, like, and maybe, obviously we go to too many conferences each year. And so, and I've even been to some that aren't healthcare, and you're like, wait, it feels the same. Just the different words on there, right? But I would say that I think people have kind of upped their game a little. Like, I didn't see any booths where I was like, wow, they mailed that one in, or they did that one last minute. Like, it all felt very polished to me, which, usually there's a whole handful of startups or vendors that are skimping or whatever. I didn't see a lot of that this year. I thought that was all quite polished and nice, which, yeah, I didn't see any that I was like, oh, I'm embarrassed for them. I would suck to be them, right?
For sure.
No, you're right. I mean, I didn't notice any ones that were sort of hurriedly put in together. That also means logistically everyone got their booth stuff there, because usually people who have the put together booths last minute are like, that's because they didn't have something shipped or something went missing. But you're right, John. At the booths that were there, even the 10x10s, a lot of them had the backlit panels. A lot of them have little demo stations. I think people really put some energy into being at HIMSS, which was a little bit different than prior years, where I think some people were just sort of taking a flyer on HIMSS and just maybe put up a pull-up banner, and that was it. So didn't quite see so many of that. And I did get some buzz though from people who were making the same comments that we are. Like, they're just saying, wow, this one felt really like back. It felt good. It felt like more like we were kind of before the pandemic. There were still some questions as to whether or not there were the right number of provider organizations at the event. But certainly in terms of people, everyone was like, yeah, I had some really great partner discussions. I had some really great meetings with the media. people seem to be very happy actually at the conference this year.
And it's funny, I had a bunch of conversations because one of the last HIMSS, I think, was right before COVID that was canceled, and everybody was either going down there or getting ready to go down there. So a lot of people were kind of reverting back to that time thinking, oh my gosh, we haven't been here since then and we've come a long way, and it's nice to now be here, with everybody, and it feel good to be back in Orlando, 4 years later after the world shut down.
The other thing that's interesting is they put a main stage on the show floor, which was an interesting change. And, I was able to go to one of the sessions there, and, I think people do like that easy accessibility because especially in Orlando, you got to walk forever to get to the sessions. So I thought that was a nice change. I heard from a number of people, they liked having that main stage style of session that was on the show floor that they could easily get there, especially the vendors who wanted to go, catch a quick session before they had to go back to their booth. I thought that was an interesting change as well for many of, for how HIMSS organized it. Probably drew some traffic there as well. So I'll be interested to see if they do more of that going forward, or if it's just one on each end, or, how that is. Obviously, in Vegas, it's a little different setup there, but they certainly still could do stages on each end. So I'll be interested to see if they embrace that. I think attendees liked that. The question is, were they paid? Were they not? Anyway, we could talk about content at HIMSS. And if we, since I already went there, I heard many people say, I wish the sessions were a little more applicable to the changing environment. And, to me, the real problem that HIMSS needs to address is the fact that they are submitting sessions and choosing the sessions 6 months out. 6 months ago, ChatGPT was barely an idea, right? It was barely getting implemented in what we're doing, right? And so, I think that's going to be something that HIMSS and now Informa are going to have to address, which is, how do I figure out better sessions? Because this AI stuff is moving so quickly. I don't want a session that was submitted 8 months ago, 10 months ago, that now they have to try to adapt, and they've already submitted their slides months before. I think that's a problem for them.
Did you manage to get any sessions, Brittany, or check anything out?
Yeah, I attended a bunch of sessions, but I think, to kind of echo what John was saying, a lot of the chatter and conversations that were happening, yes, AI, but moreover, what we're actually going to be doing with AI and the ethics around using it, and how organizations are going to use it, and what's the right way to use it. So those were some of the conversations that were kind of top of people's minds.
I got to ask you both this question because you guys went to more of them than I did. What did you think about the after conference events, like the nighttime events? Anything stand out to you there? Any trend that you noticed in terms of those nighttime events? John, I know you went. You're famous for doing this. Like, how did you find the party happening?
John's a VIP party goer.
He is. He is.
I was working. I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's hard work to do these parties. Brittany knows how hard I work at these parties.
For sure. I mean, you work very hard.
No, it's all about connecting with people, right? And that's why we love conferences, and that's why the parties are great when you have the right people there. I think it was interesting. I actually thought there would be more parties, especially in Orlando at Point Orlando, where there is like 6 or 8 venues. There was some construction to parts of it, so I don't know if that disrupted the flow a bit. But I thought, usually you go there and there's 6 or 7 parties, and you can look and like, oh, I know them, and you hop in. And this year it wasn't as much of that. You there were a couple, right? And you saw who they were, and they had the signage out there, but it wasn't quite as many of the parties as we've seen before. And what I'm hearing from people is that two trends. One is that they are combining and doing multiple vendors in one. We saw that with some of the interop stuff where they combined and said, hey, let's do a party together. Or, even big companies that have, partnerships with many people, they're joining up to do, a bigger party with more vendors, which I think is a smart thing. And the other one is just taking people to dinner and doing more dinners as opposed to parties. So maybe that was probably the 2 biggest trends I saw.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And, I think a lot of people were hanging out at the Hyatt lobby bar. Most people were kind of going there and then seeing where the parties were and then kind of venturing back there, kind of like a home base for people. But I would agree with John. I found it interesting. Last year at HIMSS was in Chicago, where you're isolated to the convention center, but there was way more parties in Chicago where you actually had to travel somewhere to go to those parties. Whereas in Orlando, everything's kind of within that space. You would think that there would be more parties for people to go to. But I agree. I think a lot of organizations were having kind of these small client dinners or these small kind of intimate gatherings, maybe seeing that those were better ways of connecting rather than having a big party for everybody to attend.
Yeah, there certainly wasn't the same number of open invitation type parties. I think there were a lot more closed invitation where it was just partners or just customers, which I think is actually a good thing. I think people have had their fill maybe of the larger parties, and these smaller ones are a little bit better. Plus, they don't. Let's be honest, you don't have to be there for like 9 hours. Right? You can just hang out there, have the dinner, and then leave. You're done. I think that ends up being better. And then, to your point, people just like hanging out impromptu, like just going to the lobby bar in the Hyatt there, which tends to be the place to meet and greet people, and that was probably one of the best places to be.
Well, I think most CIOs are hanging out there, so I think that's why everybody was going there. It's like you could go and see all the CIOs hanging out at the Hyatt bar.
That's probably true. That's probably true. And John, you're right. I mean, we hopped around a few parties that one night, and I ended up at the LK party over at the Hyatt, and I thought that was really good. But it was it was a fairly big event, but small in the sense of it wasn't like this mammoth, thousands of people showed up, right? But yeah, I like the parties. So, got to ask you this: was there a giveaway or anything that really stood out for you? I know you mentioned the oxygen, but was there something that stood out for you, John, in terms of a giveaway or a food item? I know you're into the food, so.
It's a good question. I actually ate mostly at the press room. So I did it, still some, there was someone at the far end offering, I think it was Semity offered some Swiss chocolate. So shout out to them for offering, something a little unique. I always go for the chocolate and the candy, to kind of push me through. It's interesting. I was searching for a dog. I think I shared this on the Healthcare IT Today podcast as well. But, my son wanted a dog. He made a joke. He wanted a real dog. I was going to bring him a fake dog, but I couldn't find one. So, I failed in that regard. But, it's interesting. The plush toys that you want to take to your kids are always a good thing, the stuff for kids. But yeah, I actually didn't see as many. I actually saw more games, I'd say. I played a basketball one in the Connexall booth, which drove people in, right? There were some different games and stuff, the claw machines that were there, etc. So I saw more of that than giveaways, I'd say. But yeah, anyway, I didn't, and obviously we're spoiled going to so many conferences. I just went to the promotional products conference. You see a lot of that on Swaay.Health, my coverage and videos. So maybe I got blasted by promotional products, and now I'm not paying attention as much.
Yeah, and our colleague Bonnie, who was also at HIMSS with us, she found a booth that was giving away some, I think, little plush lions that she took back for her 3 boys. So that was a cute little giveaway and something she could, take back. But I think as a mom, I'm always looking for something for my kids. So when we were at the Dell booth with our friends at Dell and AMD, they were actually giving away a branded Lego that is a data center. And I was thinking, oh, this is perfect for my son. So I was able to get one of those. So that's a great little giveaway to anybody who's kind of taking it home for their kids. When I got it back to the booth, I realized that there was way too many pieces for my 5-year-old, and that's not something I'm wanting to get behind on a Saturday. So I ended up giving it to Colin, and it's now being showcased on his wonderful wall here in his office. So it went into good hands, and I know it'll be cherished forever.
It is not often you get a Lego data center,
right?
Oh, man,
right?
Come on.
Yeah.
It's right up there next to the Lego Millennium Falcon and a few other things up there. So no, that was a really good giveaway. I was a sucker for a lot of the warm cookies that were being served on the exhibit hall floor, and then I think Bonnie and I also found some pretzels that one time that was really good. So food is always a great giveaway, and actually there was quite a lot of it on the show floor. So thank you, because there's not that many food options during the day at the Orlando Center. Although I do have to say, this year I did notice they had actually a lot more choice than they've ever had. Like they had a lot more kiosks that like pizza and subs and sandwiches, and there was a lot more food options this year at Orlando. So kudos to the convention center for making that more available, because I still remember the day when it wasn't that long ago when I like would run to the McDonald's because there was like nothing, like the lines were like enormous. This year I didn't notice as long the lines because they had so many more kiosks. So good for them for changing that at the venue.
I think they could up their food game a little bit, but just from options and healthy options, you know, coming off of Vive, they had, you know, an array of food and bowls and salads and buffets and things that you could choose from. So maybe stepping it up a little further than the grab and go situation would be nice. But I mean, we can't all be, you know, ask for everything.
Position though, right? When you think about it, and I heard some people say, yeah, there were more food options. They were a little pricey for what you were getting. And I'm like, well, you know, let's talk about relative, right? You know, Vive is something like $5,000 and HIMSS is like $2,000, or depends on when you get it, early bird, etc. Right. But it's like, yeah, so I mean, sure, if HIMSS charged $5,000 for registration, they could have all sorts of great food options, right? And it certainly wasn't, you know, $1,000 more for the food, right? So, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, it's going to be a struggle for HIMSS that I think is creating a more accessible conference for a lot of the provider organizations, whereas Vive is looking for that more executive style conference that, you know, only wants to bring in the highest, you know, C-level executives. So, you know, it is a very different approach that, you know, both of them have to balance, and they both need credit for, right? Because if HIMSS were to start charging $5,000, everyone would complain about it, even if they offered great food, right? So, you know, there's an interesting balance that both of them are going to have to go through and decide, well, does Vive want to come down and accept more of the, you know, kind of manager IT professionals, director IT professionals? And does HIMSS want to, you know, up its game and provide some food, but then increase the price? And how will people feel about that? So it's one of those, you know, welcome to conference organizing. There's always struggle and complaints.
I was just thankful for the booths that offered smoothies in the morning and protein bars, because I was just beelining for those to make sure I got those and stuffed them in my backpack for the day to keep me energized. So that was key for me.
I did have the chocolate chip cookie at just the right moment when it was needed. So yeah, thank you for that booth.
No, that's the great thing about being at HIMSS or Vive, any of these shows, right? Is that camaraderie that we all end up having with each other in the exhibit hall and on the, you know, in the sessions and so forth. You know, kudos to every of the exhibitors, because I remember way back in the early days of HIMSS, like vendors wouldn't want to give giveaways to fellow exhibitors. Like if you had an exhibitor badge and you walked up, they'd be like, oh, you know, this is for, you know, this is for my customers and stuff. And you can understand that, but still, it was kind of like, oh, I can't take one of these things. Now every night it's like, oh, you're a vendor, I don't care. Sure, take one. Like, please, by all means. Like, and it's so friendly when people are like, oh no, go ahead, take a smoothie or have an espresso. That's okay. It's cool. That to me is one of the biggest, nicest changes from way back in the day. And because yeah, like now when we talk about like going walking up, having a pretzel, and no one bats an eye that we're in a fellow exhibitor or that we're a press as opposed to an attendee. So
I do have to mention one more booth, and I can't remember the name of it because it escapes my mind, but their giveaway were these little, and it wasn't even a giveaway, they're little baskets, and you could write your name on a little card, and they were craft, like a craft basket. So all these crafts they were sending to children's hospitals. So they got a little bag with crayons and stickers and all that kind of stuff, and they were sending them to a local children's hospital. So you got to kind of write a little note, be brave, you're awesome, that type of thing, stick it in the bag, and then they would send it to a children's hospital, which, you know, warms my heart so much. And it was very, very heartwarming to see.
You know, and a little shout out too to Morgan and the team, the press team at HIMSS. They put on an amazing HIMSS press reception. It was actually the best food I've had at a HIMSS, I think. You know, like outside of maybe like a fine dinner if I went. I think I've gone to a couple there. If I ever get dinner at HIMSS, that's a different issue. But so actually it was really nice to actually go to the press event and get a nice meal. It was, props to them for the press meal that night at the press reception was really amazing. I ate like 3 meals in one, so I probably paid the price for that, but it was delicious and I appreciate that.
The food, I gotta say, you're right. The food was really good at that reception, and I have to say kudos to them as well. The Hal Wolf press briefing they had this year was actually really fun. I don't know what Hal must have. I don't know. Was he had amazing sleep that night or something? He was on fire during that session. I actually really enjoyed it, and he was having a lot of fun, which was really nice to see. So maybe that's also a fact of now he doesn't have to worry about running the event now that Informa's there. But he was and that press session was very well put together. So thank you both of you for coming on camera and for giving us your thoughts on HIMSS 24. Can't wait to do it again with you guys in Vegas next year. We're in your hometown next year, John.
It's interesting the mixed feelings people have. There's people who absolutely love it, and some people are like, yeah, I must sit out, it's Vegas. And it's interesting that whole, but what I find is that if you like the community, it doesn't matter, you're going to a conference hall just the same. It's a little more central for some of the parties and things, but other than that, you're still in a conference hall regardless of where HIMSS is. So it's not all that different.
And the food in Vegas, you can't get over the food in Vegas. Just that alone is, reason to go.
Yes, the food options much more plentiful in Vegas. Plus, I just find, and plus the one thing I like is the fact that you can every hour there's a flight to get into Vegas, so it's a lot more convenient to get to. But, anyways, looking forward to that. Looking forward to catching up with you again after the next conference. But thank you to both of you for being here.
Thanks.
Hey, if you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, please like and subscribe. Also, head on over to Swaay.Health, that's Swaay with 2 A's, .health, where you can find more great content like this. I'm Colin Hung. Thanks for being here, and I'll catch you on the next episode.